Okay, we're coming back to Max, and we're going to import our file. So I'm just going to go to File, Import, and I'm going to click Merge. Import will replace things. I just want to hit Merge. I'm going to go find the file I saved. And 3ds Max is like Photoshop. It only wants to find its files. Just go to All, and I'm just going to import the OBJ file, hit OK. It's going to ask me some questions. Import as a single mesh. Yes, it's one brick, that's fine. I'm going to hit Import. And now, Substance Painter wants all of its things facing up. Kind of an annoyance, but it's not too big of a problem. I'm going to grab this plane that I made, group, ungroup. I'm going to grab this plane and I'm going to duplicate it. I'm just going to say _LP for low poly, and I'm just going to say it's plane for projection. Just remove the shell modifier that I put there. And I'm just going to put it underneath all of my bricks because I'm going to be projecting all the detail above it. I'm going to grab all of this. I'm going to press E to go to rotate. I'm going to make sure that my angle snaps are on with A. Rotate 90 degrees. I'm going to find my plane. I'm going to select its name just so I've got it. I'm going to export it first. File, export, export selected, and export Max to Substance. So this is exporting from Max. Low poly plane, hit save. It's going to ask me some questions. It's a single plane, it's got smoothing groups, but that's fine. I don't want any media. I'm just going to scoot that out of my way. And I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to say File, Export, Export Selected. And I'm going to grab this trim sheet, high poly, version 1. Press Enter. It's going to take some time. Everything's fine there. Hit OK. This is going to take just a minute. Now, inside Substance Painter, I'm just going to say, no, don't care about that. We go to File and New. I'm going to set it to 2K. 2K is kind of the minimum. Everybody expects at least 2K, and usually you bake higher. You make everything 4K and you downscale it, but for speed's sake, I'm going to go and make sure that it does not have auto unwrap on. The plane's already unwrapped. I'm going to hit select. I'm going to go find my asset, plane for projection, hit OK. And this template, this is how it loads the materials. And PBR, physically based material, metallic roughness, I'm going to click this one. This one's fine. Its default will also be fine, but this is where I want it. Hit 2K, hit OK, and now I should have a plane. Now the plane, this is the layers for their system. So on this, I can click and I can just draw things on it. If I go down to the materials, so white, I can click, change the color again. They've got an erase tool. It's a lot like a 3D Photoshop. Control-Z undoes. Now, this paint system I don't like. I'm just going to hit delete. The paint isn't as useful as the fills, but right now we're going to start with baking. You go to the croissant, and if yours doesn't have the croissant, you can find the bake, and yours will be slightly laid out differently. I'm going to go to texture settings. And the croissant is a one button click, but I can scroll down here, click bake. It's the same as clicking the croissant. This is the preview. And don't let all the stuff scare you. I'm going to add my high poly mesh. So I'm just going to click this. That's the add button. I'm going to find my high poly. Let's see. Hit open. You'll see it populate here. It'll take a second. It's loading the mesh. Now that's the wrong mesh. If this happens to you, just click, hit subtract. Hit open. Okay, now that the high poly mesh has been added, red means that there's an error. It means that the mesh that's being projected won't see these red sections. Now, to speed things up, because this is a big mesh, I'm going to say this is the output size of the map that it's going to project. And 1024 isn't very big, but it'll slow things down. So I'm just going to hit something like 256. And I'm going to make sure that I click each one of these off. Each one of these are a type of map that do a different thing. World space normals tell any engine that's rendering it which way is up. ID map will separate each one of these bricks into different colored textures. Ambient occlusion says in between any two sections where light goes in, it won't be able to bounce out every time, so it gets darker in crevices. Curvature helps it figure out where the edges of objects are by where they bend. Position says where this object is in the world. And thickness is for subsurface scattering, like ears or wax. If you see light go through it, the light going through it, the thinner it is, the more light's going to go through it. Well, brick doesn't have much of that. We don't care about position. Curvature is important, but what we want to do for speed is I'm just going to hold Alt. It'll turn all of them off but normal. And I'm going to take my cage, and this is what the plane is projecting through, and I'm just going to push it through until there's no more red, but just barely no more. It's important not to go too far. And I'm just going to hit Bake Selected Textures. You'll see it populate here. And now, I don't see my result because it's showing me the high poly. I'm just going to go over to high poly. I'm going to turn it off. And I'm going to go to cage. I'm going to turn it off and its cage preview. And this is what the normal map does. If I hold shift and I right click, I can drag, and you'll see that it's actually showing me fake height map, not fake lighting information from the normal map. And these errors, like this right here, they show up because there's not enough resolution. Like there's a pixel that somewhere is being lost here. If I turn this resolution up to 2K and I hit bake, you're going to see that it resolves those issues. Now that's a good looking normal map. Now that I know that the normal map works, I'm just going to turn normal map off. I'm going to turn world space on, I'm going to turn ID on, ambient occlusion, and curvature. And actually, I don't even need world space for this. And I'm just going to, for speed's sake, I'm going to turn it down to 1K for speed. I'm just going to click, and you're going to see it populate those maps. First, it'll start with ID. Now it's working on ambient occlusion. Now the ID, if you see this map when I hover over it, is pure red. That means it couldn't find the bricks or how to lay them out. I'm going to click here, and instead of material color, I'm going to go to Mesh ID. Now I've already gotten these maps, so I'm just going to turn them off. And I'm going to click, and if I need to get back to the other settings, I can just click Common. The ID is one that's important to have at higher resolution. Just because if I'm selecting the separate bricks, I need to be able to easily select them. And now the ID map is populated with different colors. So now I've got everything that I need. So I'm going to leave bake mode and go to paint mode. You can just do that down here. And now I'm seeing these maps, but they're all just like this. This is a setup that's fine, but it's not very good. White's not a great thing to add. Now, I'm just going to go and add a fill layer. And a fill layer, any adjustments I make here will be made across the entire object. I'm going to go to Properties, and I'm going to go down. I don't care about emissive. Emissive makes things glow. Opacity, that's what anything that's white, it's going to show through the object, make it transparent. Normal map, we actually don't need height or normal for this part. I'm just going to go down to base color, click, let's grab some browns. And it's not a great idea to guess on your texture colors. You want to look at your references, so the Daydream environment, and see what type of colors they get into. And if I need to check something, so let's go to, let's find say I know exactly what colors I want to choose. Just going to find, I'm going to import this picture. Just drag it in over here. It's going to ask me some questions. Okay, on this, where do I want it to be? I want it to be a texture, and I only want to save it on the current session. I can make it save this permanently, and every time you open a file, but your files will get massive. Now, it's going to pop up. This is the texture section here, and I can just grab this, and I'm going to go to my fill, scroll down to base color, and I'm going to drag it over here. Now, that's a bit weird. I'm going to add another fill layer just above it, and I want to sample the colors here. I'm going to adjust how this tiles so I can see this part better. So I'm just going to scroll up a little bit, and I can play with these settings and make it larger like that, and that's fine. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to say in UV projection, try planar, and this is going to give me some options. I can move the texture around. I can W for move, E for rotate, R for scale. I'm just going to scale it up. And now I can't sample the color from this because you see there's height, there's lighting information on top of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say turn off the lighting and just show me the base color, like this. I'm going to go up to my fill layer, and this is where I want to sample that color. And to do that, I'm going to need to, if I click on it, I can't sample if I scroll down and I click on color map on this. I can't see the other picture when I click the eyedropper. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a mask. I'm just going to add a black mask, so that cuts everything out. And if I click on the main picture file, I can click back on the mask, and if I draw, it's going to remove. If I press X, it's going to invert that. So I've got X to remove, X to add. So I can change what's happening. I can also change my size. I'm just going to add that stuff back. And I'm going to go to my brush, click, and I'm going to find not an overly bright, but not an overly dark spot. So this would be dark, this would be light, something like this. And now you can't see it because there's a mask here. I'm just going to right click and say remove mask. And I'm going to turn my lighting back on so I can see it. Now that's, if I look at this picture, go back just to base color, that doesn't look very smooth. I don't see a lot of gloss going on. So I'm going to go to this layer, go back to material, and I'm going to say that's too shiny. It's going to turn some of these off. Height, I just want roughness, and I'm going to scroll to make it, this is like it's covered with oil. And if I go this way, I want something that's, and this is like carpet or rubber. We'll get something that has some lighting information in it, something like that. I'm going to scroll down. I can make things metal too, just by dragging metal. Metal material, almost every material is a metal or a non-metal. So I can get a mirror. I think something like that will do. Go back to looking at this rock. Now I'm seeing different ones have different amounts of color, so I'm just going to add another fill layer. I'm going to add a mask to it, black. I'm going to set this to be base color. Click back on the base. Click, and I'm going to grab like this darker color. I'm going to turn off the mask by going to remove. Go back to looking at the material as a whole. And what I want are some of the bricks to be this lighter color and some of them to be this darker color. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to say, all right, I'm going to add a mask, but I'm going to add a different type of mask. I'm going to add a mask with a color selection. If I click this, it pops up my ID mask automatically. And I'm going to click pick. And now let's say I want to pick this brick. Now that one's darker. And I'm going to add another one. So what about this brick? I'm going to duplicate this layer by pressing Ctrl D, where you can just right click and find duplicate. And I'm going to take this color selection, I'm just going to negative this out. And I'm going to pick a couple others, so maybe this one. And I'm going to go back to my color here. And just for some variation, add a little bit more red into it. And this is the overall strategy for making these edits. Now, there's what giving me a bevel for what baking does to this is it's going to give me some automatic materials if I want to damage these edges. So on parts of this, you see where they're chipped. I want to make sure that they actually get colored like they're chipped. As a material oxidizes or gets damaged, it's going to change color because it's going to show underlying material that doesn't have as much. The best way to put this is as something rains on a rock, it's going to deposit bits of dirt on it. So on this surface, and any part that breaks off is going to be most likely lighter because it has less of that dirt built into it. I'm going to make a fill layer, and I'm going to make this one something light so it's really obvious. And I'm going to click off a bunch of these for speed, so I'm going to turn the roughness down. I just want to put this on the edges. I'm going to add a black mask, and I'm going to show you the worst way to do this. Let's turn my size down. We would do this in Photoshop. It would take a long time. And we would just go through. I'm going to turn my opacity down too. Just Control-Zing back. And we would just go through and damage the edges and the sections like that. Just adding bits of detail. This process would take a very long time. I'm going to delete this mask. Just remove. And now I'm going to add a black mask so I see none of it. And this is one of the advantages of Substance Painter's baking is I can add an automatic texturing. I'm just going to click here and I'm going to say a generator. And I'm going to click this and I'm going to say metal edge wear. I know this isn't metal, but metal edge wear. If you look at this picture, you can see that the underlying layer is metal, the outer layer is paint, and it's finding the edges and it's damaging those. So I'm going to click metal edge wear, and you'll see it instantly pops on if I have a normal map, ambient occlusion, and curvature. Now this is really crazy strong. It adds some great detail if you've sculpted well. I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to say, or if yours could be inverted like this, going the wrong direction, I'm just going to turn this down. I want it there, but I want it to not be heavy-handed. It's very easy to overdo it. And I'm also going to say, I don't want you to be everywhere. So I'm going to click this, and I'm going to hit Control G to make a folder. And I like to change the colors. I'm going to start with red. And in this folder, I'm just going to go add a mask, say a white mask. And so I can paint layers out, like the edge damage here. So say I don't want this brick to have edge damage, or I think it's too much on some spots. Like say these bricks, because they're so dark, it seems really too strong. I'm just going to turn down my opacity. And just turn it down here. I can also entirely change layers and sections. I can add cracks. So let's say I add another fill layer. Start with a paint layer. I'm going to add a paint layer, and this layer, I'm only going to have it adjust the normal map. Let's go with height map. I'm just going to turn everything else off. You can just hold Alt, and it will invert the selection. Just going to go to height. And in the paint layer, as I'm drawing, nothing happens because height is set to 0. If I press this up, every time I draw, it's going to go up. Now that's not real. I can hold Shift and right-click and drag to see it. If I go to negative, I can push in. The only problem with this is if I want to make changes to lots of places at the same time, I can't. Like say I want to push in more, it eats things and it overlaps itself. So if I turn the opacity down and I go, I want it to be this high, wait, I want to continue this line, and now I've got this ugly overlap right here, and it's Alt and just normal, the left mouse click to move the screen. So instead of using a paint layer, I'm just going to delete that. I'm going to add a fill layer. I'm going to go nothing but height, and I'm just going to click negative. You see nothing happen. And now if I add a mask, I'm just going to say a black mask, and I draw, I can continue this line, and I'm getting this because of the opacity being turned down. If I turn this up, I draw a line, I can continue it, and because it's just a mask, I can click here, and I can adjust how thick it is. This modularity is very nice for doing tons of work, and so if I want to, like I'm just going to say down, I'm going to go to my mask, and let's just X to invert. Say I want to add some cracks in. Just going to move it down, make it small, go here, press X first. That's strong. So I'm just going to turn my brush opacity, stroke opacity down. Still way too strong. And now in here, I like that that's feeling like it's 3D. I'm just holding Shift and right clicking. But I'm going to go back to this layer and I'm going to turn my color on. And I'm just going to say, let's pick this darker color. And so now the actual piece that's cut, I can see inside it that same scratch look. So I get the lighter section. Once I've got this piece sculpted and decorated to match the reference, I'm going to export all the stuff that I've done. I'm just going to go to File and make sure that you save as save it in the substance save file, and save a new version about every hour at least. I'm going to say export textures. And this is where I save files. I'm going to click. And I'm going to go to my file. And back in normally images, Substance Painter exports. I'm just going to start down here. PBR metallic roughness. Yours won't start by this. I actually have my own presets. You're just going to scroll down until you find a PBR, physically based renderer metallic roughness. Just going to click that. Now I'm going to say based on texture size. This is the size that I want to export it at. Never go higher, just stay at the one that you're at. I'm going to just go dilation. This is how far it pushes past the boundaries of the UVs that you've set. And this doesn't matter in this case, so I'm just going to have it go on forever. I'm going to hit export. Once it's done, I can hit open directory or just find those files. And they'll be here. So this is the diffuse. Now there's no emissive. There's height is what I carved in here. Metallic, not metal. My normal map. This is my roughness because the scratches on the outside were more rough. The closer to white, the more rough it is. The closer to black, the more glossy it is. I'm going to take these, and you can see that my normal map, it also caught the height map data. I'm going to go into max. I've got this plane. Just rotate it back down 90 degrees. I'm going to press G to turn the grid off. I'm going to press M. I'm going to add my own material. You can add any of these, but I like PBR Metallic Rough. It's not as good as the Arnold material, Standard Surface. This is the most powerful material, but this one is for game engines and everything transfers perfectly. I'm just going to drag it onto here. I'm going to open that file, and 3ds Max only lets me bring in one at a time, so I just have to click and drag. Normal map, roughness, just try to line them up. Base color, there, it's updated. Roughness goes to roughness. Normal map goes to normal. And you'll see them update. And this is pretty lazy, but it definitely works. That texturing job, not that these files don't work. All right, now there are more files that I can get out of Substance Painter. I can get my AO map, but I don't really need that. And you can adjust your maps. In every single engine, they're going to adjust a little bit differently. If I scroll down, if I click this texture and I scroll down, I can make adjustments to how light and dark things are because different programs interpret them differently. On my roughness, let's go. Second, I've got to tell it to start rendering so I can see my alterations. I'm just going to click Active Shade. Now I've got an HDRI environment already added to this scene, so I can see changes being made. And you can see the original material by default not going to show up in the way that you expect, because the default renderer is just about speed. So this is going to show up. Just by inverting it, I'm changing the white pixels to black. And so I've made this less glossy. Every program does it a little bit differently, but you can also customize this. So if I turn invert off and I go to enable color map, I can pull one side up and see what it does. I'm just adjusting. If you look at 0, this is my black value. I'm just changing my black value to make it more white across the board. This is the entire texture range. Just something more like that. And now I can press 2, make sure that I have preserve edge faces, and I can scoot it out and have tileability. Just going to turn off standard, active shade. This is a very fast way to make alterations, and this will definitely help us in the future.